Hello everyone. Today I am going to begin with the second unit in our paper Literary Criticism and Theory. In the second unit, we have two topics. There is the Preface to the Lyrical Ballads by William Wordsworth and Coleridge's Biographia Literaria, chapter number 4, 13 and 14. I suggest that you concentrate on studying the preface to the Lyrical Ballads by Wordsworth, and you can study Coleridge's Biographia Literaria as an alternative. But you will surely be getting one question on each of the topics. So if you prepare Wordsworth's preface in detail, you will be safe that way. So the topic is the preface to the Lyrical Ballads. Now, what is a preface? A preface is an introduction. The work, the Lyrical Ballads, was actually a collection of poems. Okay, Lyrical Ballads is a collection of poems which was published in 1798. The poems were contributed by William Wordsworth and his good friend Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Most of the poems were by Wordsworth and a few poems were written by Coleridge. And their joint publication was titled Lyrical Ballads. This work, Lyrical Ballads, was published in 1798. And this year marks the beginning of English Romanticism. This time period from 1798 to 1820 approximately is known as the Romantic period or the Romantic era in English literature. So what happened with the publication of this book, Lyrical Ballads, that the time period came to be known as English Romanticism or Romantic period? We have to go back a little for that. The 18th century English literature is known as neoclassical literature. It is known as the period of neoclassicism. Neo means like. Classicism refers to the times of Aristotle and his contemporaries, the ancient Greek and Latin literature time period. Now, the 18th century literature was known as neoclassical literature because the writers in the 18th century believed in following the rules and regulations given by the ancient classical writers. They gave stress on following the rules and regulations. What happened because of that is that poetry became stereotypical, a sort of mechanical quality crept into the poetry. The poetry did not deal with the emotions or imaginations of human beings. Poetry became prosaic. The poetry of neoclassical period was mainly about city people and their issues. So, nature, the people living in villages, such things were neglected in neoclassical poetry. Most of the poetry was written in the form of satire. Satire was the dominant poetic form of the 18th century, which is known as the neoclassical period. Wordsworth and his contemporaries revolted against this tradition of neoclassicism. Wordsworth and the other Romantic poets such as Coleridge, Keats, Shelley, Byron began writing a poetry which was different from the neoclassical poetry. And this is why this new type of poetry came to be known as the Romantic poetry. It was different from the neoclassical poetry. Now, the work Lyrical Ballads is the book which begins the era of English Romanticism, and which is why the publication of the Lyrical Ballads is an important event in English literature. And here we are going to study the preface to the Lyrical Ballads. So, for the book The Lyrical Ballads, an introduction was written by Wordsworth. This introduction to the book The Lyrical Ballads is known as the Preface to the Lyrical Ballads. In this preface, Wordsworth talked about what he was trying to do by writing poems which were different from his predecessors. Who are Wordsworth's predecessors? The neoclassical writers. Wordsworth did not believe in writing poems like his predecessors. He wanted to write about the village people, the farmers, the peasants, the simple men and women living in villages. He wanted to write about imagination, about nature. In a way, he revolted against the traditions of the neoclassical writers. He began writing poems which were different from what were being written in the whole of the 18th century. And in this preface to the Lyrical Ballads, Wordsworth explained his reasons why he was writing these different kind of poems. Wordsworth gives us his reasons of writing poems which were not like the neoclassical writers. When we talk about William Wordsworth, we have to remember that Wordsworth is a great poet, and he is primarily a poet and not a critic. As a poet, Wordsworth is counted among the greats of English literature. As a critic, Wordsworth has not written many books. His output as a critic is less in quantity. His most important critical book is, of course, the Preface to the Lyrical Ballads. When the Lyrical Ballads was published in 1798, Wordsworth had written a very short introduction to the Lyrical Ballads. So there are phases of the book, the Preface to the Lyrical Ballads. For the first time, a very short introduction was published with Lyrical Ballads in 1798. Then the book The Lyrical Ballads became popular. The need arose for a second edition of the book. The second edition of Lyrical Ballads was brought out in the year 1800, 1800. And with this second edition, Wordsworth converted his short introduction into a detailed introduction. So, the preface to the Lyrical Ballads was published in 1800, though the Lyrical Ballads was published in 1798, and it had a very small introduction attached to it. The things did not stop here. Another edition of Lyrical Ballads was published in 1802, and Wordsworth made more changes to the preface. So, another version of the preface was published in 1802 edition. And even after that, in the year 1815, another edition of Lyrical Ballads was published, and Wordsworth made some more changes to his preface. So the final preface to the Lyrical Ballads was published in 1815, 1815. Now, what is the importance, what is the position of this preface to the Lyrical Ballads in English Romanticism? You have to remember that Wordsworth's preface to the Lyrical Ballads is regarded as an unofficial manifesto of the English Romantic movement. A manifesto, a declaration of aims and objectives. A manifesto means a public declaration of the aims and objectives of someone or something. So, Preface to the Lyrical Ballads is an unofficial manifesto of the English Romantic movement, which began with the publication of Lyrical Ballads in 1798 and continued up to 1820 or 1825 roughly, and which includes the works of the great Romantic poets such as Wordsworth himself, Coleridge, Shelley, Keats, and Lord Byron. So today I have given you a small introduction to Wordsworth as a critic and his preface to the Lyrical Ballads. We will continue this topic in our next lecture. Thank you.